Yeah, well, I
edit
mean,
that
my
out.
main hope is that this is going to be more Top Gear than Clarkson's Farm.
That's what this podcast is about. It's basically just two guys on Zoom explaining AI. And, why watch us? Well, because we'll actually explain it in a way that's symmetrical. We'll talk about multiple sides of every piece that we cover instead of, corporate hype or shilling or, well, you want to get started with the introduction? Nobody knows who we are.
Yeah, yeah. Go. Please go on,
No, no,
Stu.
yeah, okay, I'll kick it up. So, Vin Vashishta, if you don't know who I am, I've been doing something wrong. I've been in technology for about 30, yeah, as of August, it'll be 30 years in technology. I've built and led teams at every phase of the software development life cycle. I run a consulting company called V Squared AI. We're one of the first pure play data and AI consultancies. We've delivered over $3.7 billion in value to Fortune 100 clients, to startups, SMEs. Wrote a book, best-selling author of From Data to Profit, as weird as that sounds. Been teaching classes now, taught over 8,000 students, teach leadership, product management, product strategy, AI, data and AI strategy, the hot thing. Definitely coming out with some new courses here in the next couple of months. Been featured on Wall Street Journal, The Information, LinkedIn Top Voice, Gartner Ambassador, blah, 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 blah. That's me.
Yeah, I've got regret now. Wish I'd gone first. You know, like when you just, it's really difficult to follow that. Yeah, Stuart Wintertier. I do some data and AI stuff, and I rant a lot on LinkedIn, and you can find me there. And I'm not going to follow that. I'm just not. So
Well, you could. You really
no,
could. I mean, there's a
no
reason why
way.
people follow you. There's a good reason for it. You're one of the few people that actually talk common sense, and I mean there's
Well,
too much hype.
let's start there then. I had a post yesterday. I had to clarify because I think people struggle. People. The trouble with LinkedIn is that they're not reading it sequentially like a book, like your glorious
Yeah.
book. Okay. So they dip in, they dip out. So you could be accused of all sorts, kind of out of context. Like recently has been I'm anthropomorphizing. Well, yeah, I can't caveat every single post and every single metaphor and every I have to lean on the common language because especially if I actually want to communicate something to people who haven't got time to read a massive book. But the thing is that this kind of anti BS doesn't mean that you're anti AI, anti data and AI, you're a Luddite, you're anti technology. It just means that you don't feel like you've got to lie to make it useful. Or you don't feel like you've got a, and I didn't know whether to bring this up for him because we had spoken previously of the problem of being in consultancy as a prime example.
Yeah.
Okay, now you come with all your honesty and all your anti AI hype and BS, and then you lose it to someone who's like agents everywhere, you know. And it's kind of like there's no way I would betray my own morals. I can't do that, but I wonder if that means I'll be eternally poor. That's a possibility. But how do you counter it? How do you counter that?
You've taken
You
a
know,
vow of poverty. You're the new AI monk. In order to speak the truth to the masses, you've taken a vow of poverty.
I can't afford shoes, but man, I've got moral integrity.
I feel like you don't have to be a monk. I think you can be a capitalist. I think you can be greedy and at the same time be honest and realistic because overpromise, underdeliver. Every client I
Mm,
talk to has had some experience with consultants who have overpromised and underdelivered. And I'll be honest, if you fall for the hype, that's not my fault.
mm,
And as a consultant, I don't take ownership of making a pitch that I can stand behind, explaining what can be delivered, and then losing that client. I don't take that personally, and I don't internalize it. Just because there's that external consultancy that's willing to overpromise and I know they're going to underdeliver, doesn't mean I have to do the same thing. And I think increasingly, I mean, one of the reasons why we're fully booked is because we do deliver. We will give you what we're promising we'll give you. And I know that sounds sort of like, well, duh, that's what you should be doing. But if you look at the world of AI consulting, it is a giant grift. I wrote a
Hmm.
Substack article about it. There's just so much of a long con and long game inside of the consulting world, and AI is sort of the latest label that you can wrap around.
Yeah.
A cool PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, of course we can deliver all these ridiculous things that are really not possible, not feasible. But if you push these dates out long enough, if you say, oh, it'll take us 18 months, it'll take us 24 months, if you push these things out long enough, maybe you'll be able to do more in a couple of years than you can do right now. And maybe they'll forget about what you promised by the time that you actually end up delivering. And, who knows? There may not even be the same leadership in place in 2 years. So
Ooh.
there's so much of this that's just a long game, long con. And that's not right, obviously, but I mean, don't take it personally.
I don't blame companies for not wanting to embark on this kind of like a 5-year transformation plan. We'll
Yeah,
get there one day,
yeah.
all complete. Because I do think there's got to be this element of kind of, okay, look, we're done with that. We know we're on fire. It's a bonfire. Everything is. But we need some quick wins. We need to show the board. We need to show some gains. We do need to do that. Equally, maybe in parallel, we can try and sort this dumpster fire out as well. So it's kind of, I do get it, but yeah, it's when it leans too much on the wizardry that I don't know.
Something that got said during office hours yesterday, and I actually advised the person who said this, don't, don't say this out loud. Don't say this in public. You'll be, there'll be people waiting outside for you. They'll put a black bag over your head and take you to a site where, they're going to disappear you for saying these types of things. But of course, I'm going to repeat it now on the pod.
Yeah.
Of course, what am I going to do? I'm going to repeat it. So what they basically came out and said was, look, I go into these companies as a consultant and I talk to employees who have been part of these businesses for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, never been part of a successful product launch, never been part of a successful, really initiative, can't measure any sort of value or ROI. And now they're asking for raises, they're asking for promotions, they're getting turned down for them because they're not delivering any value. But at the same time, the people that are supposed to be ensuring that they're delivering value aren't doing it either. They're sort of falling for the AI hype. AI is everything. We just need to do something with AI. They're measuring success by how many models they put into production,
Mhm.
or how big the data sets are getting, or how big their budget and headcount is. And there's all of these sort of BS metrics that your leadership team is accountable for. And so on the other side, there is a lack of accountability for outcomes and results. And I mean, I'm wondering, one, are you seeing the same thing? Two, what are we doing? What should we be doing about this sort of a problem?
I can't help it, and this is probably on a tangent to that, but it reminds me of something I've come across such a lot, and I probably shouldn't be talking about this either. And that's when you're dealing with more the startup side or that sort of smaller company, sort of, and they have this obsession with. We've got to have a product manager. We've got to have someone from one of the big logos, from one of the FANG companies.
Yep.
We've got, yeah, from one of the giants, because and when you sort of say, well, why is that? There's never really any, well, it's because when we scale, it's because of when we innovation, or it's because of this, or it's because of that. And you sort of think, well, you haven't even found product market fit yet. Let's just, let's just hold on a little bit here, but that fit, that
Can we
fit.
scale a dumpster fire? I mean, does that
Do you know what I mean? Oh,
can we
and don't
scale
even
that?
get me started on that. We're going to get a VP of growth in. Don't even go there with me. All right. Don't, because then you'll see fumes. Anyway, but the thing is, there's this kind of obsession, isn't there? It's like, I listen. Oh man, I don't want to give the wrong impression. There is some wonderful, and I know some wonderful people in these companies, and they're just awesome in every respect. But equally, there's a degree that have got into that sort of slow performance metric, very bureaucratic and performative, sort of way of being. And if you've got to get down the runway and keep the lights on, or you've got to innovate fast, you've got to do things that outcompete your competitors, now. ahora, as we say here in Spain, then it doesn't fit necessarily. I probably shouldn't have said any of that. So yeah, I do see a lot of it, but it more annoys me to see the kind of startups and those smaller companies that feel like they need that person, and very often it doesn't work. That's just my own, objective uh, observation. Let me put it
Yeah,
that way.
I see the same thing. There's that obsession of big tech.
Hmm.
Everything that big tech does is right. And if you look at big tech, look at Meta, fell behind on AI. Apple fell behind on AI. Google let a startup lap it on AI. Microsoft right now, there was an article yesterday, I think it was in Bloomberg, where Microsoft's Copilot is struggling against ChatGPT because ChatGPT just has better mind share. It's better
Yeah,
awareness. More people use it as a consumer product. And so they prefer it at work. And the perception is that Microsoft's Copilot isn't as advanced. I think they had somebody from Bain who
yeah,
looked at it and said, yeah, I mean, it's getting better, but it's not as good. And so we have this mentality that we've got to poach these people from all of these companies. If you get somebody from Meta's AI group, you're in it. But then you look at, well, what has Meta's AI group really been able to deliver in the last 3 years? Well, they've got Llama and they've been begging businesses to take Llama and they just can't. I mean, they can't give it away. They are literally giving it away and they can't. So they haven't gotten any sort of penetration into the enterprise. And yet, at the other end of this, you've got enterprise companies who are trying to poach Meta employees. And you sort of wonder why? Why is there this obsession with big tech? Why is there this construct, big tech's doing everything right? Yeah, I get it. Their stock's amazing. I mean, their stock is doing absolutely incredible. But when you look at it from we're an enterprise company, don't have the same infrastructure that this person's used to, don't have the same culture that this person's used to, don't have the same sense of completely different levels of urgency, much, much higher, have to deliver, have to be more business centric rather than technology centric. I really wonder why are so many enterprise companies so obsessed with big tech talent when they're oftentimes pulling these people into an environment. And I talk to people that come out of big tech, go into
yeah,
enterprises, and they go back because they're like, this is just so not what I'm used to and not what I signed up for. I don't want to
yeah.
do this enterprise big tech, version of AI. So I mean, it's both sides. I don't know where the obsession comes from because the myth doesn't match.
Well, I can just nail this for you, and this isn't anecdotal. This is something that's happened over and over again. So we're a Microsoft. So you go into advise a company. We're a Microsoft shop. Like
Yep.
security and things like that are obviously seriously important to us. So we got to do everything with Copilot. So and Copilot's evolving. It's getting slow. Blimey, it's slow, but incrementally it's getting better. Okay, that's super. Well, let me come in and do an analysis. I'll have a look at the front line. We'll have a look at the mid level, etc., etc. And they're not using Copilot. They're all using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And they're up. And because and why? Why? Just ask them why. Because it's better. It's better. I'd you can qualify that and judge that as much as you want, but that's the simple fact. But nobody can compete with Microsoft because they've got the distribution. Well, actually, on the ground, something else is actually taking place here, and there's a good reason for that. Why? You've already hit on, potentially why this is happening. Pure play innovation companies can do the innovation and then worry about the enterprise side of it. Whereas, when you're stuck the other way around, you've got to worry about the enterprise side first. You've got a lot of other considerations, but the reality on the ground is exactly as you've described it. I've seen it, spoken to them, interviewed them.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild to me that there's this disconnect between the C-suite because with my consultancy, I work primarily with C-level leaders and connecting the dots, really,
Yep.
how do you monetize? And I'll
Yep.
talk to C-level leaders and get one picture of what's going on. They say,
Yeah,
well, we've
exactly.
got, 20,000 licenses or 5,000 licenses for this product and another 3,000 licenses for this one. And here is the CIO's view of how many licenses are out there. And the assumption is we've bought all these licenses, we have all these people, everyone's using it. And then I'll get down to the ground floor. I'll talk to people on the
Yep.
front line. Nobody's using any of this stuff. They're all
Yep.
kind of bring your own tools. They're,
Exactly.
and it's a mess.
Yeah.
sort of this just train wreck happening where
Yeah.
people are using stuff I've never even heard of. Every once in a while, I look at that and go,
Yeah.
wow, I think that's spyware, actually. I don't know that that's an LLM. I think that
I
might
put
actually
up a
be
post
something.
about shadow AI, and somebody was like, "Well, I don't think that's a reality. I mean, like, are you sure that's a reality?" And it's like,
Let me
"You're
show
obviously
you.
from the
Here,
you're
hold on. Let me
obviously
do
from the
it.
C-suite."
Yeah, I got my phone. I'm taking video. Like that's what you have to do. You have to sort of be doing that sneak cam video. Like people are
You
looking
know,
like, why is this
well,
guy
mate,
filming? And it's because your
yeah,
CEO won't believe me if I
no,
don't.
Sponsor our podcast, or we'll say mean things about your products next week.
no,
They will not believe that this is
no,
what's going on because the CIO is telling them I got, 20
yeah,
million dollars,
yeah.
some
We're doing
ridiculous
AI
number.
now. What's the matter? We
We're
don't need you.
AI
We're doing
first. Why? Because we have like 50,000 licenses to ChatGPT. That's why. Like, but that's not how any of
Oh
this
dear.
works.
Uh,
I,
oh
I,
well, there you
ah,
go.
I
Hmm.
feel like, and this is something I gotta ask, just sort of going down a little bit of a tangent on this, but I
Do
feel like
it.
all of us live this shared reality,
I thought he was going to
which
swear then.
is
Sorry.
just sort of ridiculous. Like when I tell
Yeah,
these stories, everyone has another story to riff with, and everyone
yeah,
has oh, I
yeah.
can tell you about, and it feels like all of us experience this sort of shared delusion and shared dysfunction. I mean, do you get that too, where you're starting to talk to people that just start nodding there? It's like, oh my God, I'm in therapy.
I think this sort of shared delusion thing. I think people are beginning to see, like, I've got this famous saying. I've said it on your post before. Leave me in my delusional bubble. I'm happy in here. I'm always saying it to my wife. Okay, there's a happiness in our little delusions. My wife says I'm riddled with them. And absolutely, that's where I keep my little pot of happiness is inside those. But yeah, absolutely. I just think that the whole industry, I'm just going to come and say it, the whole industry is a little bit delusional right now. And I mean, I'm desperate to talk about it. And that's Elon Musk's tweet. No,
Do it.
come on, I've got
Let's
to.
do it. We've
You've
got to
got to
bring
allow
this
me.
one
I've got
up.
to get
Yeah,
it
no,
out of
we
my
got to do it.
system.
We're
You
gonna
know what I
do it.
mean?
Yep.
You can imagine. So let me just read, because I actually wrote it down just because I'm desperate to say it. So
Okay.
we will, right, this is Grok, right?
Yeah,
We
Grok.
will, we will, Elon and Grok, presumably. Okay, right.
Yes.
Anyway, the two of them in
It's the
wicked
new royal
partnership.
we. It's me and my
Oh,
AI.
wow. We will rewrite the entire corpus of human knowledge, adding missing info and deleting errors. Now, you could almost, I could almost, as soon as I read that, I told you the story, didn't I? Like, I was supposed to go out with my wife, and my wife's like, get off LinkedIn, get off LinkedIn. Anyway, just as we were about to go out, I saw that. I was like, oh man, I'm sorry, love, I've got to go, I've got to get on LinkedIn. Yeah, because at the end of the day, this is kind of like, you can imagine Zuckerberg and Altman. Altman had just come off his brilliant blog post on how wondrous and smooth the continuum is, or whatever the heck it is. It's like describing a black hole as cozy to me. But it's kind of like, we're going to
Was
take
quiet.
this. Yeah, this quiet continuum,
Yeah.
blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah. We're all going to be mega wealthy, and it's all going to be trickling down. It's a utopia, but we're going to rewrite. You can imagine, like Zuckerberg and Altman and people like that. No, use your inside voice, Musk. Use your inside voice. We told you not to say this stuff, because I think that people can't understand. I can't believe I'm ranting about this. I'm sure this isn't the place, but people can't understand how you can burn billions a month, when it doesn't seem to have any viable kind of commercial pathway to justify that. I'm afraid Musk actually said it, because this kind of whole, and I'm just as guilty. I know this because I talk to ChatGPT a lot, far too much, and it becomes the curator of knowledge. It becomes
Yep.
the
Yeah.
prism through which you view it, and it only takes a little bit of, how did he add it? Adding missing information and deleting errors, according to Musk and Grok, for example,
Yep.
to start skewing you, and you start to see that power. And this is the kind of delusion that we're in at the moment. I think is a whole thing of it, and people can't get their head around why it's so delusional. And I think it has a lot more to do with just commerciability and making enterprises, or even getting rid of the worker so there's no money. They need money. We need to consume. We're in a consumer society. But anyway, I'm sorry I got onto that. I just had to get it out of my system.
No, but it's true for your enterprise as well. Because
Yeah.
right now there's a race where the companies really realize it or not. There's this race to control the enterprise's knowledge. There's a race
Yep.
to control the enterprise knowledge graph because the person that controls the enterprise's knowledge graph controls the business.
Yeah.
They control the direction of the product, the direction of operations, the direction of investment. So if you control the information, if you control the knowledge graph, you are essentially the one who's in charge of what data people see and the information that they use to make decisions with. And you can skew a business in any direction that you want to. So this isn't just sort of a societal, I don't know, theoretical academic type of endeavor. When you talk about the construct of a world model, people are like, what are you talking about, world model? But this is the construct of building out all of the knowledge, all of the information about the business, about the different business units, the operating model, the business model, the technology model. All of this lives on top of the information architecture. And if you control that information architecture, you control the direction of travel for the business because that's what the business increasingly is relying on in order to make all of its decisions. So this isn't just, sort of this academic pursuit that's happening in society. Inside of companies, there is a war for who controls the information because you control the information, you control the narrative. I can make my budget as big as I want it to be. If I have information that says if you spend $10 on my organization or in my silo, it'll return 4 times as much as investing that any place else. And that's really the danger for businesses. Who controls your knowledge? Who controls your information architecture? Who is making sure that the data that's being delivered, the information that you're using to make decisions with, isn't skewed by somebody's agenda? And that could be a vendor. If your vendor controls your information architecture, they control the direction of your business. I mean, if you give over your information architecture to a consultant like me, I can make whatever picture I want true inside of your entire enterprise. And it's no longer coming from me. It will be coming from other people in the business who are looking at the information that I'm providing and making decisions based on all of the factors that I think are most important. Which ones are going to be most important? I mean, if you're a consultant, where do you go? Whatever makes it so that you're paying the most for my people and giving me the most work. So you can see how you can really get to this disalignment, and that can have massive enterprise consequences. But this is the struggle right now. This is truly the power struggle for who controls the information, who controls its flow, who controls what's accurate information inside of the enterprise, who says what information needs to be augmented. And you begin to realize that once you control the information, you control the enterprise.
I'm really glad you said that because you kind of take a sort of a disparate societal 1984 thought from
Yeah,
my head
yeah.
and then kind of make it concrete for the enterprise. I hadn't actually sort of made that leap. It's obvious because if you're saying what I'm saying, then what you're saying then is the effect of that, but at the enterprise level. And this is the thing, isn't it? Well, we're all used to this because we've been storing our information with whoever the bear moth is.
Yep,
But no, this is something different. This is actually a nudging in a certain direction, both on a societal and on a decision
yep.
level.
Exactly.
This is a different power altogether, and I don't think people are quite grasping that.
But when you look at AI as this sort of model, as this thing, you disconnect it from what builds it, what creates it, right?
Yeah,
And I mean, AI is an information product. It isn't something that can exist on its own, right? There's no way for AI to stand on its own. It needs something to run on. It needs something to train with. It needs, a way to interact with people. It needs tools. It's an ecosystem, right?
yeah, yeah. Mm,
And
okay.
we overlook, I mean, so many different components. We overlook those pieces, and if you have control of those components, I mean, you really do own the narrative, don't you?
Yeah, and exactly. That is when they will own knowledge, and what parts of it you may have access to in a much more profound way than ever Google could, in term because I always think of Google is obviously a search engine. Now we're looking at answer engines, and answer engines starve the original source if they wish to, whereas the search engine always pointed you to the original source. This is a curation it's a paid middleman. It's a
Yeah,
rent-seeking middleman, if you
yeah.
like. Whereas it was never like that. We could make all these. Oh, well, you could say the same about Google and Google Search. Or you could say about Microsoft. No, no. This is qualitatively different. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's you're seeing LLMs become the gatekeepers to the
exactly. That's the
internet.
word.
And I think there was an
That's the
article a
word.
couple of weeks back where the Wall Street Journal was quantifying the impact
Mm.
to its business, and the Washington Post has done something similar. A lot of companies are really quantifying the impact on the number of click-throughs that are coming through search, and they're using words like collapse. And
Mm.
we are deconstructing these contracts that the internet was built on. Why would you create content if no one's going to go to your website to consume it? What is the monetization? And for somebody like me, I mean, obviously the monetization is I want you to be able to find my company. I want you to be able to find my services. I want you to be able to find my classes. So that construct of discoverability is still valid for me because you're clicking through to buy something. So there is a purchasing element, and I can still monetize it. But if you look at news sites, if you look at companies like Stack Overflow, if you look at all of these companies now have seen a massive collapse in the click through, and they don't have a monetization. There was just a ruling in court for, I think Meta was the one that was being sued by a bunch of a bunch of publishers, and I think Anthropic had a similar case where they were sued by a couple of authors. Both cases, the content creators lost, so they were
Yeah.
unable to recover any sort of damages as a result of AI scraping their intellectual property and using it to train models. And essentially, it's not exactly the same. It's not verbatim a copy, but it is the same content idea wise. That's where it's getting this from. And so books, I mean, books like mine are included in the LLM. And so you're no longer monetizing. Why buy a book if you can get the entire summary from AI? So we're
Yeah.
breaking the contracts. I mean, what do you think comes next for somebody if you're running a news site? I mean, obviously the paywall is a big defensive mechanism, but if the primary way that people find you is through a search engine or through social media and they can't get to the next step, if there's no point because they can get a summary, what do you think happens to these companies?
Well, I'm a prime example of that. So somebody says something, they do a link on LinkedIn, I go, it has a paywall. And I probably shouldn't confess this out loud. Sometimes I'll go off to an unnamed large language model. We'll just keep it like that. And I'll say, hey, what's this news about? Can you give me a summary of it? And it will. And I know full well, as I've sort of gone off to deliberately prove to myself that it looks very, very similar to that thing that was paywalled. But that's one of the reasons why I won't mention which one it is, because I don't want to overstep the mark. But equally, where is their monetization at that point? Um, yeah,
Yep.
it's what's the
It's like
point in
Apple
even collect? Yeah,
snapping the digital camera out of existence. When the iPhone came
yeah,
out, digital cameras were big, and as soon as the iPhone came out, they weren't so big, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, digital cameras on phones were bigger than ever in a sense, and
Yeah.
that's how we sort of birthed. Facebook. I can upload my photos now, Vin.
Yeah. And that's what, for me, fundamentally, that's what worries me is all of these sites that used to be able to monetize
Hmm.
through ad dollars or through some other mechanism, they can't. So how do these sites survive? How do all of these legitimate news sites, the places that we get information from, sort of back to your original point, how do the companies that we've come to rely on for accurate, high quality information, how do they survive when there's no monetization left? And then what replaces them?
Yeah, are we just old? Are we just worrying about old-fashioned things in a sense? I do wonder. I would do want we
Hmm.
look. You know, we both confess that we're Gen X, right?
Yes.
So to each other privately. So somebody said to me,
Well, I don't know. Not
"Yeah,
so
but
private anymore.
yeah, well, anyway, so somebody said to me, "Oh, yeah, but I miss the tactile nature of this, that, and the other." I'm actually the same. I dream of getting rich enough to have an old car, you know, like one where you can feel the cables and the pulleys. It's got real light bulbs. You know, you've got a flat tire because it's the steering's getting a bit spongy, not because something's bleeping at you, like a sort of very sort of a dictatorial manner. But then I suddenly thought to myself, well, hold on a second, aren't I just being old here? Because like this new generation, that surely that we're just, they'll find new ways to monetize, but maybe the old internet just goes away and something new comes, and perhaps we're sort of quaffing our brandies and worrying about something that the next generation just simply won't worry about because they didn't really know it anyway.
Old journalism professor of mine asked a question, started really the entire semester with a question. How do you know what questions to ask if you don't have the context to understand what's important? And I think that's the bigger challenge is if you get rid of quality sources, if you get rid of expertise being able to be showcased and coming to the front, then the people who are asking AI questions don't have the context that they need to evaluate whether the answer they're getting is high quality, low quality. Is this an expert answer? Is this garbage? Same thing in the enterprise. If you're looking at enterprise data and the information behind it, how do you know if what you're getting is the right information to make this decision for? Well, how do you know if this is going to lead to a better decision outcome? How do you know if what you're being shown is a symmetric picture? Or if really you're just getting cherry-picked information that shows you one side and leads you to a particular conclusion or
Mm,
decision. This is why I think data literacy, information literacy, AI literacy is such a huge, huge necessity for C-level leaders. Because if they don't have that context to
agreed.
evaluate the information they're considering, if they don't have
Agreed.
decision frameworks, if they don't have really that decision literacy, then they can be led around by the information that's supposed to be making their decisions higher quality. So there's so much risk here that and what you bring up, sort of that point is critical for enterprises to be considering. And I think it's not really an old person shaking our fist at the cloud type of moment here because these are legitimate concerns. Whether or not, whatever your favorite news source or whatever your favorite credible author is can monetize or not, there's still a need for expertise. There's still a need for high quality, trustworthy content and context. So that's the point. If the people who are delivering their expertise on the internet right now can't monetize that, trust me, they'll stop. And if all it takes is throwing money at a previously trustworthy source to make it say whatever you want it to, then you can buy reality. And I
By
think LLMs make
reality.
it cheaper to buy
Yeah.
reality.
That's the core of the curation of knowledge that concerns me. There's two things I just before I lose them out of my head, and that is that you mentioned the word expertise a few times there. I remember one of the reasons why I work and live in Europe. I love Europe is because I left Britain after the decision of Brexit.
Yep.
And why did I? And there was no doubt during that decision of Brexit, there was what was considered to be the war on the expert.
Yeah.
The war on the economic expert, the war on, and it was like the devaluing of the expert,
Yes.
and it has manifest real world impact when that happens. And just on an anecdotal front, and I love to say this because it touches on your C-level comment, but just puts it in an anecdotal framing. I am renowned for how poor I am at coding, right? I just am. I should never confess this. I've been trying all my life, just one of those things.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
I could tell you about language. When I came here to Spain, I frog marched my family. We must all speak Spanish, etc., etc. Now they're all fluent, and I'm not. But anyway, the point I want to make is that I am terrible at coding. So when I jump on Cursor, okay, I am like a superhero. The things I can build with it, it makes me feel almost magical. In fact, I want to jump on LinkedIn and declare the death of engineering as a profession, because I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, because I am uninformed, because I don't know the reality of this industry. And this is the whole crux of the problem, isn't it? Is the fact I'm not an expert. I don't know what I don't know. So now I think that I know everything. And this is the crux of that kind of the very core, going right from my silly example right up to the C-level of $1 billion company, not having that kind of grounding in sort of data and AI literacy, at least to the degree that they need to understand it, which is very different to anybody else. Completely understand that, but it means they can be wish-washed around by anybody and anything. And like if Lord forbid they spend time on social media, but if they do and they don't have that kind of at least that ability, like me with coding, I do actually know that I know enough to know I'm rubbish, so at least I have that, which actually helps me not jump on LinkedIn and declare the death of engineering, and
Good.
save
It's
my
good. Yeah,
face.
it's never a good claim to make.
But anyway, I just wanted to make that point: the death of the expert and the
Yeah.
war on the expert. And then you think of the new knowledge expert as Grok and Musk together. I'm making no comment on either, particularly. I'm just highlighting those two as an example because he happens to
Well,
tweet, and
he's the only one that said it out loud. Yeah,
he
he's
said
the only
it.
one who sort of admitted the
He didn't
game.
use his indoor voice.
Yeah. Sort of
Yeah.
forgot he was talking out loud. Yeah. Wait,
I'm
did I tweet
really
that?
glad he did it. It was marvelous. But it's that that curation, and the worry is, of course, I have actually sort of gone to ChatGPT and sort of like asked it questions about things I wasn't so sure about to get a little bit of a grounding in that knowledge and information. And the thing is that it is curated, and is that becoming my expert? And that is a concern, because like even just in my world of sort of product and strategy, if I leap on to ChatGPT and say, give me a strategy, or give me
Yep.
product ideation for
Yeah.
it's rubbish. It's absolutely rubbish. But
But it feels good.
curated,
But it
yeah.
feels
But
good.
I wouldn't know. The reason why everybody's using it and why they're all going to coalesce into the center of nothingness and everything's going to be the same is because they haven't got that domain expertise. Now the irony is that without the expertise, it looks magical, but
Yeah.
actually the power is in the hands of the domain expert, because they can see the rubbish and the fluff and the nonsense. They can get rid of that. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's not a bad point. Actually, I could incorporate that. What about if I refined this? Maybe I can mold this into something. And that kind of iterative process actually becomes very, very powerful. But not having that expertise, I know I've labored the point, but it's one of my favorites, so I can't help myself. Yeah.
Well, I mean, expertise leads to a good second topic that we've got here, which is research. It seems to be turning into a vehicle for marketing. We've got Apple's piece where they essentially said, "Oh yeah, models don't reason, they don't think, they don't, oh, I know, grab those pearls, clutch them
Tortoises don't
tight,
mull over the philosophy of the universe when they munch lettuce. That's the akin of it, isn't it? That's the equivalent.
clutch the pearls, they don't reason, they don't." And then you
Did
read
you see all the LinkedIn posts? Did you
oh,
see them?
everything. Yeah, and there was still it was on CNBC this morning. Somebody
Oh
did an entire
man.
article on this thing, and they buried the lead because at the very end they talked to an actual, somebody who's a CEO for a company that's building agents, and the CEO said, "Well, it kind of sounds like Apple's just, they're late to the party and they're just going, oh, well, yeah, LLMs are terrible." as a way to sort of
Yeah.
excuse their own lateness. Then you read the research. You actually like read, what did they test? How did they
There's
figure it
about
out?
47 people
It
doing
was like
one task.
it was like all of these toy puzzle problems. It can't
Oh, I
solve
love it.
puzzle games, therefore it
Yeah,
doesn't reason. And I'm just looking at this
yeah.
like, what?
I know.
What are
I
you
know.
talking about?
I know.
And
I don't
uh,
know.
since then, people have pointed out multiple ways to get the models to do what these researchers claimed they couldn't get the models to do. And, the models are claiming, oh, this is, an entire collapse. But it's like, I don't care that it can't do the Tower of, what is it, Tower of Hanoi problem or the, I don't care. That's not what I do. No, and it feels like we're interviewing these things like we interview people, where you look at some of these jobs and you're just
Anthropomorphizing.
like,
This is the
that doesn't
problem.
make any sense.
Yeah,
And I feel,
yeah.
and I feel like the research has gone that direction. When you talk about the war on expertise, the war on true knowledge and information, it feels like now we're looking at research, and even research is being used as an arm of marketing, where
Yes.
we are actively being deceived. I read another one. It's the MIT, this is your brain on Chat GPT, and you
Oh,
look at the
brain
sample
rot.
size,
Right. This
54
is what. Sorry. This is what I was referring to when I said 40 odd
54
people. Yeah.
participants.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
54. That's your
Yeah.
sample size. And the world now is looking at 54 participants as the entirety of human
But
knowledge.
did you
And,
see
they,
the
they're
LinkedIn?
saying,
ChatGPT causes brain rot.
yeah,
I mean, no
54
wonder it
people.
goes
That's the sample
viral.
size. Are you
It's
kidding me?
amazing. You know.
And no one reads the research critically. Everyone's afraid to say, because it's MIT, because it's Apple. You look at the research and you're just like, this is flawed. I mean, how do we get people out of this? How do we get people to realize that research is being weaponized as another arm in this sort of war on expertise?
This is really tough. Now one of my favorite things to do is to publish a paper and try to give a breakdown of it in a way that sort of touches often on the caveats and limitations at the end, and tries to break this down. And it is hard. It's really hard because firstly, there's only me in the cracks of life and work trying to read through. I mean, some of them are very, very verbose for starters. Some of them aren't, but there's only so much that you can read through. And so I try my little tiny bit to sort of like say, okay, let's try and see through this research. Let's try and get through, and see what it's actually saying and what its methodology is, and whether this has any credibility. And so I do try in that tiny way to do it, but it's lost in a sea. It's lost in a sea because
Yeah.
most of this is marketing. And one of my absolute bugbears, and I won't go into it too much, but I promise you, is the problem of anthropomorphizing. As I say, this has come up recently in my posts, and I apologize profusely for doing it. I just don't know how else to communicate half the time. That's by way of explanation, not excuse. But it's happening throughout the papers. So now we've got PhD level AI researchers that are doing exactly the same. And now one of the reasons I struggle so much with AI doesn't reason is because reasoning is an inherently human cognitive process. And this is what we're continually doing. Of course, and that's why I made the joke about old tortoises don't philosophize over the meaning of life while they're eating lettuce. No, they don't. And neither does AI reason. It never reasoned. It's this problem. And what my main concern is, and I promise I won't go on about it much, is that in the process of the anthropomorphizing, not only do we have a lot of psychological and cognitive problems of attachment and mistrust, of which I myself have been guilty and found myself doing in troubled times, but it's the devaluing of human cognition at the same time that troubles me more than anything, because we're reducing our marvelous capabilities into mathematical equations through the machine. And I believe a lot of it's deliberately engineered. Like there was a mass of papers about chain of thought. Rubbish. There's no such thing of chain of thought. It's just we think, they don't think. And so that's really and you can see how all the papers are exactly to your point. So if you get Anthropic say, here's a paper about chain of thought, or perhaps even the limitations of chain of thought, there's an
Yeah. Yep.
oxymoron because there is no thought. So now we're into marketing and we're into anthropomorphizing. Why are we into those things? It's to create that bond. It's to blur the line between you and it, and it's about marketing. So I know that was a lot of information packed in there, but it's a very crucial point.
No, there's a lot to unpack. And I think the biggest piece of that is you're going to get sort of this third and fourth hand account of research coming at you, especially if you're in the C-suite, if you're in a non-technical role, you're going to get this second, third, fourth hand account of this information from the research and all of these responses that other people have to the research. And what gets lost is any sort of expertise. Anyone looking at this with a deep research background and saying, okay, so here's what they're really explaining, and
Yeah.
here's the limitations of the, how far and how much can they actually assert? How much of this can they actually support? How much of it can they prove? And there's so little that they can actually prove, that they can actually support. Many of these research papers are really pointing at here's a direction for further study, and I'm providing you enough data and enough information to say there's something worth studying here. But then they also, for the marketing, draw sort of the salacious conclusion, and you don't get those two extracted because the content that talks about the nuance is boring and it's not going to do very well. The content that talks about the salacious headline is going to do amazingly well. And that's what everyone sees. And then you have, which one do you build off of? Okay, so I could build my follow-up article to either this boring thing that no one read or this really big, salacious, viral thing that everyone read. I wonder which one I'm going to write about. Hold on. Let me think. And it's human nature. And this is where the
Yeah.
non-experts get so much traction because they don't have any credibility to begin with. So they're not worried about
What have
losing
they
their
got to
credibility.
lose?
Like, you don't have to worry about it. If you don't have any credibility, what's to be afraid of? You're not losing anything. So of course I'm going to say whatever wild thing gets me followers.
Oh man. Oh,
And this,
that's so well said. I love the way you framed the papers there. You're absolutely right. So I can only read one or two a day because 98% of the paper is just really dry, really grinding
that's
stuff,
the stuff that people like me read. Like we get into that.
Exactly.
We
But
read
that little
abstract after
conclusion,
abstract, looking for the one that's worth reading all the way through.
and I mean, like, how do you choose out of that 120 papers that came out today? Like
Yeah.
even I have to filter them based on, well, that was a good headline. Oh, I like that. That was a catchy, because
Yep.
I don't know where else to begin, or it's because I'm in a particular theme, or oh, that matches something I was talking about with Vin the other week. Let me look at that. Well, models as the most sort
Yeah.
of recent prime example. But you're absolutely right. But I don't know how else. The C-suite, like how else they can get it but to filter it and filter it through. Goodness
I mean,
knows.
I set this up for clients, but I also tell students if you want to exert soft influence, lunch and learns, seminars, but even bigger than that, just a once a week newsletter where you can debunk some hype and you can bring attention to things that are worth paying attention to. Use your expert filter, share it with C-level leaders, share it with the rest of the business. That way, instead of going externally for knowledge,
Mm,
they can turn inward and they can look to you as an expert source. If you want to increase your authority across the enterprise, start releasing newsletters every week about just basic AI developments. I know it sounds like a lot of work. It can be, but it's really important. And it's going to begin to build your influence across the enterprise because people are right now hungry for
yeah.
ways to keep up and stay, to keep up with all of this. And they don't know what's important. They don't know what's, completely hype. They don't know what research they should be paying attention to. And they don't even know what in that research is the key critical takeaway. If you can provide your expert filter, move the hype to one side, debunk a couple of myths, add a few pieces of information over the course of a year, delivering 52 of these things. You're going to increase the overall data and AI literacy across the enterprise with just a newsletter. So is it worth doing? Yeah, this may become sort of your way to prevent a lot of these things from running away with the enterprise. And I know it's not always the data team's responsibility, the AI team's responsibility to do that. But look, you're the one who suffers the most negative consequences from this happening. So if you don't do it, you're the one who suffers as a result of this information vacuum. So why not control some of that narrative by introducing your expert filter? Put your finger on the scale. This is one of those good times where you could put your finger on the scale and tip the information balance towards sanity, towards value, towards reason. It's a really good thing to do just to get your expert filter in there. And what you'll find is over the course of a few months, the number of people that are reading this will skyrocket. And your soft influence, your soft power within the business will grow significantly.
If you like that insight, there's more in Vin's courses. Check them out at datascience.vin and take 10% off with the coupon code podcast.
I can't applaud that enough. I restrained myself, which is really good, to let you conclude that. I can't applaud that enough. There's never, ever, ever, ever been such a desperation for clarity.
Yes.
Just filtered clarity. Okay. And for those that are watching this and considering doing it inside the enterprise, do it as much for yourself and your own sanity as well.
Yeah.
We have a small window here, folks, between the hype and between the doom. There's a wonderful little window that I'm discovering on LinkedIn myself, which is, and I'm by no means claiming to be the greatest expert in anything, but just to take that time to try to give some clarity. There is a window. People are hungry for it, and it keeps you sane in the process to do it. So yeah, I'd really second that. Well said.
Yeah. Well, we're running short on time. Thank you, Stuart,
good.
for being.
I hope folk enjoy it.
Yeah, let's hope. I mean, the first episode, that wasn't bad. We covered a lot of ground in 60 minutes.
Well, I've got nothing left now. That's it.
Yeah,
I can't do anymore.
That's it. Done. All right, that was one and done. We're never going to do another one of these again. I hope if you liked it, we don't care.
Exactly. Now that's Gen X. Now that's Gen X. There you go. I don't care.
No, the great thing about AI is next week there'll be a ton of stuff. Heck, next week it could be tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
For all we know.
Yeah.
Tomorrow could be the news dump. That's sort of how AI works.
And aren't we going to do one of those jump on and do a hot take? Even so, if Elon Musk does another one of those tweets, and I need 5 minutes to vent, man, I'm just going to jump on and you'll just see a 5-minute take.
Definitely, yeah. Send me a notification, send me a DM or whatever the kids are doing these days. Maybe you can send me something on Slack. I mean,
oh dear, love it.
Yeah. Definitely. We could definitely do a few of those throughout the week. So anyway, thanks for joining us. We appreciate, the tens and tens of views that this will generate. Bye.
Bye.
If you're listening, your customers are too. Let's talk about a sponsorship.
That's it.
It's old school, isn't it?
This is the reality right here. People see me showing up at conferences, they're expecting some sort of massive high tech.
Here's my pad.
I'm writing like it's 1938.
Cool pen and parchment.
If I got to, if I started blah, 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 blah,
and me.
Yeah, if I feel like either one of us started going blah, 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 blah. Where it was almost
keep some of the humor in there though. You've got to keep some of the funny bits.
Oh no, that's all staying. But when we have like a verbal seizure, I'll definitely take those pieces of it out.